Hello and welcome to this edition of Behind the Scenes, where we take a look at what went into making the costume for Oscinia, the faun songstress of the wood. This picture is really what set off the whole series. I knew that I wanted to make a faun. My husband and I were reading through Narnia and Mr. Tumnus. Stole my heart again, and I just knew that I really wanted to make something, my own version. And so I started with the legs, which I knew would be the most challenging aspect, trying to get that silhouette and not break my ankles. I did a bit of research before I started in on this and learned a lot of different techniques, and the one that I ended up using was upholstery foam and cutting several pieces, gluing them together, and then carving them into the shape that I want to create that illusion of a different shaped leg than what I actually have. And I found that it worked really well. It was really easy to adhere pieces to each other, and it's so lightweight. So just using a spray adhesive, I was able to attach them to the back leggings. I added a little bit of hot glue just to really secure it on there, but not too much because I still wanted to be able to bend and move with them on. Once I'd finished building the skeleton of my legs, I wanted to make a pattern for essentially a pair of faun pants. Kind of like a slip cover that would go on over the skeleton, and then I would cover that in moss. So to make my pattern, I wrapped my leg in saran wrap and masking tape, and then cut myself out of that, and using that shell I was able to make some marks and make a pattern for a pair of very irregularly sized pants. And I'm wondering if maybe that should be my new profession, maybe custom clothes for fantasy creatures of abnormal proportion. The fabric that I had for my pants was a green fleece left over from a giant Snorlax project, and so I made a mock-up with an old bed sheet just to make sure that everything fit properly, and I was pretty pleased. It was a little weird to shape in the crotch area. I haven't made very many pants. I'm usually a skirt kind of gal, but it was an important challenge for me to conquer. But yeah, sewed all them pieces together, got yourself a pair of pants. Then came the overwhelmingly tedious task of covering every square inch of these in moss. I considered using fur. I really love the way they look, and maybe one day I will make another pair with fur, but I really wanted something different, and I thought moss would be really interesting and so messy. It's like nature's version of glitter. You find it everywhere. I have found it in so many different wigs and in just corners of the car, but I really love the way that it turned out in the end, and literally just hot gluing it all over my pants. Next came the hooves, which you can't actually really see in the picture, which is a shame, but they were a lot of fun to make. I used a wedge shoe as my base, and then kind of built up the boot with some foam, and using some air dry clay I molded the front hoof part that you see there, and just kind of texturized it a little bit, made it look a little rougher and gruffer. And in a lot of tutorials, they say to cut off the back wedge part to create that interesting silhouette, but I wanted a bit more stability, so I'm actually just going to put more moss around that wedge just to make it kind of look like, well, I guess fur would be coming down the back of the leg. It was really interesting to experiment with a lot of different mediums and techniques to try to achieve the look that I was going for. Maybe some ways a little backwards, and some ways from the accumulated wisdom of previous attempts at something similar. And it's just really interesting to see the shift in how I go about creating certain things. Sometimes there's a focus on durability and sometimes there isn't. I think I approach certain things understanding what it's like to wear it, and it's not always comfortable, but if you can find little places where maybe you can ease the discomfort of something strange being attached to your body, I do try to find those places where I can make life easier for myself and for whoever is getting strapped into the gear that I'm making. So the next portion of this costume was the horns, and originally I had actually made some ram horns. Then I decided I wanted to make these horns look more like tree branches and antlers kind of mixed together. My first attempt, I used tinfoil to shape it and then covered that in masking tape and then tried to cover that in an air dry clay. And I wanted to keep it lightweight, but the tin didn't have the structural integrity to support the weight of this relatively lightweight air dry clay. However, when there's a lot of it, the weight does add up. And that was my whole concept for this antler headpiece. I wanted it to be big, so I wanted to use as lightweight materials as I could, because when you're balancing things in your head, the weight adds up really quickly. So tinfoil didn't work, scrapped it, moved on, and tried to make another prototype, this time using a gauged wire. And the wire was relatively easy to bend, and I was able to make these shapes and use some metal tape to make little branch twig pieces. And when I had a shape that I liked and a base that I felt was strong enough to support the really big bend there at the beginning, I added some masking tape and tried with the air dry clay again. And I really like working with air dry clays because if you have an inside that can't be baked, or you want a little bit more flexibility, they're really nice. They are super lightweight. You can, mold all kinds of different shapes and carve into them, and there's a lot of pros. I think I would use a different type the next time I made these, but I did like the wire base. I think I would make the actual head brace part out of the gauged wire as well. And they were really heavy and hard to balance, extremely hard to balance, but I did like how they turned out in the end. The next part that we're going to tackle is the top, and I had actually made a completely different top prior to this that was covered in ivy leaves, and I don't know, it was too much green, I think. So to make a little bit of contrast and separation between the body sections and to kind of tie into these branched antlers, I made a corseted top type deal. Made it look like it was wood. It was really fun using the wood burner on foam. I think this is my first time actually doing it, and I ended up doing a lot more. The more costumes I did in this series, it's really quite fun and therapeutic and satisfying to watch in time-lapse, I gotta say. I thought it really tied the antlers together with it because they kind of had a similar texture going on. It's a little bit more subtle when you pull it back into the full frame of the image, but I'm glad it's there. Once I had it all carved, I primed it with a Mod Podge
and got on all those little cracks. Then did a couple coats of brown spray paint, and after those coats had dried, I went in with like a darker brown blackish wash and kind of just went into all those little cracks, then wiped it off and gave it a little bit of weathering and added a little bit of moss and all the little cracks and crevices and spots it may grow. And honestly, I think those final little touches really brought it together. I think there's a lot of areas to improve, but overall, like, really excited. And not too bad to wear. Now, the first time I tried to wear it, I didn't have my seams really reinforced enough, and it actually broke. I had like all my makeup done. I was like fully dressed. We got to the park, I had the wig on and everything, and the boob cup literally just popped open, and I was like, well, it was like sunset at this point, and I was like, let's do it tomorrow. So reinforce your seams. This was moments before it started pouring as well.
Flippity floppity, let's get out of the rain!
Added a bunch more birds because Oscinia is the songstress of the wood. She gives all of the birds their songs, and so I really envisioned this like swarm of birds just lovingly coming to her call. Thank you so much for coming on this extra long journey with me of trial and error and discovery. I appreciate you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!